Welcome to the Irish Pagan School podcast. Your hosts are authors and co-founders of the Irish Pagan School here in County Waterford, Ireland, Lora O'Brien and John O'Sullivan. Fáilte.
Hello, Fáilte. This is Lora O'Brien from the Ogham Academy and the Irish Pagan School and the Pagan Academy. And I just wanted to tell you briefly today about how I got started with the Ogham. So within our culture, within our traditions here in Ireland, I would have been aware of the Ogham growing up, but peripherally aware. Most Irish people, I would say, would at least recognise it and maybe know what it's called, but not everybody, of course. However, we do have a lot of Ogham representation through our culture and in our society that is often almost subliminal, but it's definitely there. So I would have grown up with this, as I said, peripheral understanding, very vague understanding of what Ogham was. And then 80s, 90s, I started to get fed the Celtic Cash Cow from UK and US authors and teachers who decided that they were going to, cash in on everything Celtic. And we started getting fed complete crap about Ogham. Now, this didn't start with these people in the 80s and 90s. It started with Robert Graves, who decided that he was going to invent the Celtic tree calendar. So there's a lot of misinformation that was around. And unfortunately, the sources that were available were not widely known. They were it was pre-digitization, so it was quite difficult to access the source material. You had to have actual copies of the original manuscripts, the manuscripts where the Ogham resources appeared, such as the Ogham Tract or Liber Ogham, the Book of Ogham. So, in complete fairness, it was more difficult to get access to it. But honestly, if you can't do the research, if you don't have access to the resources, you shouldn't be writing the book. Okay. Now, so what my teenage self was being fed about the Ogham was a load of crap, basically. Unfortunately, there was, I think, a pretty infamous one, Celtic Wisdom Sticks. I don't need to start naming the author again. Everybody knows I have a thing against this particular English couple because of their trash source information. So anyway, the damage that they have done to Irish culture through this Celtic cash cow that they have decided that they're going to, weigh in on and are still making money off. So that's grand. Look, is what it is. But as a young Irish person, as a young spiritual Irish person, as a young person who was receiving ancestral messages, who was having experiences in the other world, I had nothing solid and nothing reliable. I was poor and penniless in a sea of nonsense, basically, that was being said about the Ogham. So as I went through, I was not in the academic realms myself at that point, but I had to create a very quick learning curve for myself because what was commercially available was not doing it. So part of it was re-educating or, taking down a lot of the crap that I had been taught or thought I was being taught and getting my feet under me with some solid information. So I started to try and do some more academic research. And somewhere along the way, I came across a copy of George Calder's translation. Now, what I'd like to do is actually, in the spirit of making sure that everybody has access to the same resources I had access to, what I'd really like to do is do a series on this channel where I read from George Calder's translations and make sure that people have voice access, have audio access, have visual access in whatever way suits them. So what I'll do is I'll put that on the screen and read it, and any commentary that is relevant or necessary will go in there. So if you're interested in that, please comment below and we'll see where that takes us in the near future. But at the time in the 90s, what was happening was A, we were getting access to the internet, and B, we had some Celtic Reconstructionists. Now, some of these were quite militant. These were mostly based in the States. Some of them I wouldn't piss on if they were on fire currently. But one name shines through from there, and that is Erin Rowan Laurie, who is very serious scholar, very studious, very respectful, very authentic in their approach to anything that I've ever seen them do, honestly. So they did publish a book, which I didn't have access to, but when I started getting on the internet, I started getting into some of the Yahoo groups. That's where we are. Some of the Yahoo groups, and started to get a little bit more access to some of the source materials. And that's around the same time that George Calder made his way into my library. So that was good. So as I was exploring it, I started to understand a little bit more about how, yes, there were 3 associations, but there were also many, many other associations with the Ogham, and whole lists of associations. And it wasn't just about trees, definitely. So that was a big revelation for me. Examining the different association lists, such as the Colour Ogham, or the Artistic Skills Ogham, or the Pig Ogham, which is an interesting one, the forts, all of these things. There were a lot more resources, and there was a lot more to the Ogham. But a lot of people at the time were interested in the Ogham as magic and the Ogham as divination, and still are, of course. So I made myself a set, and I started to read, and I started to develop my own divinatory meanings for the Ogham, which I have used. You can access those through, there's a class at the Irish Pagan School currently on Ogham divination, and in the Ogham Academy, I'll put a link below to a free PDF that you can download that has some of the very basics that will get you started. So that is the culmination of many, many years, like 2.5 decades now, of me working with the Ogham. So I would have started in the early 2000s to actively work with the Ogham, to do readings for people, to give Ogham guidance, to do divinations for myself, and again for other people, both professionally and personally. I would have been working at the time. I was a very young single parent at the time, practically a single parent, almost free. So I had time at home. I was staying at home with my kids. So I got on eBay, and I would have sold Ogham information and Ogham charms and things like that through eBay at the time. Because, again, this idea of authentic information, people were out there selling crap. And at least if I was doing it, it was going to be the real stuff, the right stuff. And it wasn't going to be cultural appropriation for anybody to be buying it or working with it or using it. So I wanted to stay true to that. But through all that, I had a very, very strong interest in the place of Ogham in our history. And the more I read about it, the more I started to develop a theory, or a hypothesis perhaps, that the Ogham had quite an influential place in the development of Irish identity. So we're skipping ahead now quite a lot over those 20 years, and we come to the start of the Irish Pagan School in 2017 and the start of the Ogham Academy in 2019. And the reason that I started the Ogham Academy was because I had decided that I was going to go back to college and get myself a master's. So the topic for my master's was that hypothesis, was what I wanted to explore. And it ended up being the place of Ogham in the development of Irish identity in the 18th and 19th century in the Leinster region, which was the hub of a lot of the revolutionary activity was happening. So I explored all of that. I did a lot of research. You have to do primary research for a thesis, obviously a history thesis. And I did it. And the conclusion to that thesis is that the Ogham had and still has a very strong place in Irish society and Irish culture. And honestly, it's only getting stronger. And I like to think that maybe, I've had some small part to play in that. But at least there are resources that are available for people now that are authentic both to the academic side of things and the actual medieval manuscript tradition, the archaeology of the Ogham. And there's some amazing work being done by Nora White in the Ogham in 3D project, and by David Stifter from a linguistic point of view. And of course, then, you had Damien McManus as well, who was probably the classic Ogham guy, Ogham academic, who wrote the book A Guide to Ogham and really explored a lot of the carvings that we had from the monumental tradition, which predated the manuscript tradition in the medieval times and into the 17th century even. So there's a lot there, but also then what you have with the Ogham Academy is somebody who has been personally, practically, and spiritually and magically working with the Ogham for over 2 decades more, and who has grown up soaked in this culture that has the Ogham on the periphery, and again is coming to prominence, I would say, now in a better way than it ever has been. So that's kind of my journey with Ogham. If you're interested, again, there's a link below to the Ogham Academy where you can explore the blog, get on the mailing list, all of that. But there's also a free PDF resource to download below, so you too can have authentic information, both academically and practically and spiritually and magically and authentically from Ireland. So hopefully that's been helpful or useful or interesting for somebody. But I will see you in the next video. Slán go fóill.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a positive review in your podcast listener. Then head over to irishpaganschool.com and enroll in one of our free or paid courses. Slán go fóill, and we will see you next time.